evening, everyone. Looks like we are now live here on YouTube as well as on Zoom here. And today we have a very special guest, Jagmeet Singh, MP and leader of the NDP party. So thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Can you tell us maybe a little bit of your background into how you got into, first of all, practicing law and studying law?
Sure. I always wanted to, initially I wanted to be a doctor like my dad. We went through a lot of financial difficulties and struggles. My dad ended up losing his job. We lost our home. And when I was in university, I had to care for my little brother who was going to high school and I was going to university. So I was feeling the pressure that I wanted to get into a profession quickly. I wanted to start earning money so I could support my little brother, my mom, and my dad. And so one of my philosophy professors suggested me applying to law school. Is a bit random because I was taking sciences at the time and I was doing a biology degree. So got into law. Once in law, I was also an activist helping support groups that were fighting poverty, fighting for rights for marginalized people like New Canadians and refugees. And so that kind of got my activist spirit about how we can help the people around us. My spirituality also informed that. And then some of my friends, my brother, Singh, who's now an MPP, and one of my dear friends, Jagmeet, they all encouraged me to run politics. I didn't want to do it, and they kept on pushing me. And eventually I kind of caved into the pressure and I started my political career running as a hopeful candidate to become a member of parliament. I lost my first run, but then I got elected as a member of provincial parliament. 7 years later, I'm now the leader of a national party and a member of parliament for Burnaby.
So the next question is coming from one of my students, Adil. So Adil, can you please ask Mr. Singh a question?
Jagmeet Singh, thank you for taking my question. How has the House of Commons been operating during COVID-19?
So we're in a minority government, so any bill has required all parties or at least one other party to support the government to pass a bill. So we've been working in that context. The way it's been working really is we've been pushing and fighting for changes. So the Liberal government has seemed to basically want to leave people behind. They've been leaving people behind and we've been fighting to say, no, don't leave people behind. And so we've been fighting to include people like students, seniors, people living with disabilities. So we've been fighting to make sure the Liberal government doesn't leave them behind. And we have right now emergency sessions which operate like a regular parliament. And then we have a hybrid parliament that is basically virtual, so people can dial in remotely or can Skype in, not Skype in, they can Zoom in remotely, and also people are there in person physically. So that's kind of how things are going.
Thank you for answering my question. Sorry.
No worries. Now related to that, what can you tell us a bit about the success that happened earlier today? Give us the exclusive scoop there.
Okay. Fresh off the press. It just happened minutes ago. I was just in Parliament, came home, changed out of my suit and chatting with you. So fresh off the press, what happened was we had been fighting for help for people with disabilities and for a wage subsidy that actually hires more people. We've been fighting to keep people hired and to help businesses hire more people. So the two things that we're able to achieve, one is we got help for people with disabilities. That bill passed today. It was our work, our negotiation with the government to get this bill passed. We fought with them to get more help to people. And basically the government initially didn't want to help people at all that were living with disabilities. Then they offered to help some, but leave a lot of people behind. And then we pushed them to get at least to help the majority of Canadians living with disabilities. There's still more work to be done, but we've got them a long way from where they started. And then on the wage subsidy, basically we were able to pass a bill that would help more businesses hire people and keep them hired. So this is about keeping people hired on their jobs. The wage subsidy before is very limited in its scope, and we've broadened it so that if a company is facing with a downturn, like they've got less revenue and they can't hire as many people, but they haven't lost a lot of revenue, but they've lost some, they can still access the wage subsidy. So that was a big win to help more people get that help and get that support.
Now, what is your assessment of how Prime Minister Trudeau has handled COVID-19? If you were the Prime Minister, what would be something you would do differently?
Well, the main difference is that the government's approach, the Prime Minister's approach, has been to leave people behind, to help some and not others. Our approach is we need to help everybody, and we need to help them as much as possible right away. The big difference is that they were willing to leave people behind, and we had to fight them not to leave people behind. So that was really the big difference. And for us, our focus has always been on people. I've throughout this whole pandemic thought, how do we get help to as many people as possible, and how can we help them in this difficult time? Thinking about what it was like when I didn't have a lot, when my family was going through financial struggles, the pain of not being able to know how to pay the bills or to buy food. I remember when my brother and I living together, some days I didn't know how I would feed us. I didn't know how I would feed him. And sometimes the generosity of his friends was the only reason why we were able to eat, because his friends would send home food with their parents made. So I remember that, and I had to fight to make sure we got that help to people. And the Prime Minister, after a lot of pushing, a lot of fighting, we got him to do the work. But it wasn't like they were going to do it and they just were sped up. They were literally not going to help people, and we forced them to do it. So we've been successful, but it hasn't been because they've been willing to collaborate. It's because we force things to happen.
Now, one of the things that I and my students particularly love is your use of social media, Twitter, Instagram, especially TikTok. What are your thoughts of connecting with Canadians in this time using social media?
We got to use every tool possible to speak to people where they are. So, back in the day, people would say, well, people hang out at a coffee shop. Let's go to a coffee shop and speak to people. Now people hang out on TikTok. So how do I speak to people if they're hanging out on TikTok? I got to make a cool TikTok that connects with where people are and what they're at, what they're up to, and speaks to them in a way that is real. So that's what I've been trying to do. Just speak to people where they are and in a way that engages with them. So that's been really no secret, just the same idea of when you go door to door in a campaign, because people are at home and that's where they live and that's where you want to reach out to them. Similarly, I'm like, we need to speak to people on Instagram and on Twitter and on Facebook. So try to speak to people in all the platforms, and then in each audience is slightly different. So I try to follow the culture or the tone of the platform.
Now, with online and social media, one of the things that I've noticed there, especially, there was a recent Ontario Court of Justice decision where 20,000 people tuned in, compared to your own criminal defense experience, where you're lucky if you can get 15 people in those courtrooms outside of the media. What do you think about this in terms of the open principles we have in Canada? Is this something that we should be doing more of?
Well, first off, on the case, the Defonte Miller case that you're speaking of, this is a horrible example of violence perpetrated by police, and it's why we need massive reform, why we've been calling for stopping putting more money into the hands of police and putting more money into the hands of healthcare workers, and reviewing the use of force and focusing on de-escalation and completely changing the way police respond to people, not with these violent, aggressive commands, but by focusing on de-escalation and supports. And really, people need more help. They don't need more police in a lot of cases. They need affordable housing, or they need mental health supports, and they need healthcare responses. So that's, I think, a big overlaying issue. But on that, I think open, transparent courts are very important. I think using technology to make it more open and transparent is vital. People feel trust in the court system, the justice system, if they can see it work. And that's why the default position has been court cases are transparent. You can search them, you can look them up. And it's only after an application that you can ban the name. A publication ban can block out someone's name. But the general principle is you still should know about the case and what happened, the details, and the decision. People want to see court. They want to see justice happen, and they also want to know if it doesn't happen, so they can fight to change laws and improve things.
So speaking of systemic racism, there you've said it's at play where someone can be arrested after allegedly ramming a truck, at Rideau Hall, and a 90-minute talk with the RCMP, while repeated times in the last couple of months, police have killed Indigenous people and people of color during wellness checks. So what can we do to ensure that all arrests are held to this same standard?
We need a massive change. Like, it should not be an exception that someone is arrested by the police and not harmed. That should be the norm. And to make that the norm, there's got to be a systemic change. It's not just a one person or a bad apple scenario. It's a culture and a system that specifically targets racialized people and that uses force disproportionately against them. So we have to change that. And some of the things we can do is end racial profiling, review the use of force, focus on de-escalation, and replace a police response with a healthcare response to a healthcare crisis. You don't need someone showing up with guns to your home if you have a wellness concern or if you have a mental health concern. There should be a different approach.
Now, how confident can Canadians feel about what the current government is doing to tackle racism when it cannot be defined or addressed, or even when it's brought up there by the RCMP? I think you said even President Trump is doing a better job in this thing.
Well, it was a sad thing, and it's not like Trump is doing a great job. He's horrible as well. But just I wanted to make the contrast so that people can think about Trudeau's empty gestures. He's done a lot of empty gestures, and he's made some symbolic gestures and empty words. But what has he done? How are people better off from 2015 to 2020? Like, what does it change if you're a racialized person? What concrete change in policy or in legislation has the Liberal government or Prime Minister Trudeau brought in? Nothing, really. Nothing at all. And so right now, people shouldn't have confidence in the Prime Minister because he hasn't actually brought in any changes. He took a knee. I'm actually standing in Ottawa, pretty close to where he took a knee in a protest. But who is he protesting? He is the Prime Minister of Canada. He doesn't need to protest. He should actually, instead of taking a knee, take a stand and immediately end racial profiling in the RCMP. Something that can be done, something that we fought for in Ontario. He could immediately review the use of force. He could say that we're not going to spend more money on policing, we're going to spend more money on mental health workers. There's so much that can be done immediately, reviewing the budget. There's nearly $10 million a day spent on the RCMP. These are things that can be done right now, immediately, and he's done nothing. So people can have confidence in the Prime Minister since he's shown in his actions really no action.
Now, in response, you had a motion there at the House of Commons earlier this month, and then you called the Bloc Québécois MP a racist and got removed for failing to apologize. Do you regret your actions in any way? Would you want to walk it back?
I apologize for nothing. No, but the reason is because in that moment, it wasn't about me. Like, I actually personally believe in apologizing. If you make a mistake, you apologize. But the thing is, it wasn't about me. It was about the frustration that so many racialized people, Indigenous, Black, people of color, the frustration they feel when in a movement that we're in right now where people are demanding action and you've got a federal government that can do something and it's just not doing anything. Like the fact that they're so afraid to do any concrete change in legislation and policy, that is frustrating. And the fact that someone would stand in the way of a motion that actually called on the government to do some of those concrete things. I don't apologize for that. But what I am disappointed in is the fact that the attention was drawn away from Prime Minister Trudeau, who is the one in power. Like, I don't care about an opposition party. They're not in power. I care about the Prime Minister and the government, the Liberal government, that has a chance to do something about it that's not. And that's where I want the focus of the attention to be, on the fact that we need to change and that we need to save people's lives, and we can do that.
Now, what would you do differently than if you had that power there in terms of fighting systemic racism, fighting issues around mental health and how we respond to it? What specifically would you do if you had that opportunity?
Sure. Well, I've touched on the policing side of things, so let me put that aside and talk about systemic racism more broadly. We know that there's a lot of social determinants of health and a lot of social determinants in general that are at the root of systemic racism. So if you're Indigenous, if you're Black, if you're racialized, it's harder to find a job. It's harder to find a place to live. You're going to have less opportunity to access education, to get the healthcare that you need. And so what we need to do is invest in things like affordable housing, investing in job creation in communities that have been hard hit, making sure that we've got a fair process for hiring people that doesn't discriminate based on someone's name. There's a lot that we can do to invest directly into the inequality. If we invest in healthcare, we invest in housing, we invest in creating jobs, these are going to help those who've been hurt the most. So the more we invest in affordable housing, the more it's going to help some of the most impacted by systemic racism. So those are some of the broader things we can do.
Now, what advice would you have for some of my students who've mentioned they've been victims of racism, whether systemic or direct. What advice could you offer for them?
First off, I'm sorry that it's happening to you. You're not alone. It happens to far too many people. It happens to just so many people. If you can find a way to report it or to bring it up, if it's an act of violence or hate crime, it's important to let people know. We need to report those incidents. The more we know about them, the more we can put resources towards them. And the more data that we have, the more examples we have, the more we can fix. I think about carding in Toronto. The only reason we were able to actually, as a community, fight back against carding and win a little victory was because we had evidence to show that, Black people were being stopped disproportionately in communities because of the color of their skin for no reason at all. So the evidence helps. Raise the concerns, raise the issues, let people know, let your member of parliament know, let your member of provincial parliament, city councillor, raise it with people, make your voice heard.
And on the other hand, what about people who have not experienced this and their response? I think even some of the police chiefs said to you is that you're making this an issue of racism, and even perhaps some of my students may think, well, hey, we're talking about this a lot, and I've not experienced racism, and I'm a person of color, and I think we're kind of overdoing it here. What would you say in response to those individuals?
Well, I'm happy that some people haven't experienced it, but the evidence is there. We've got evidence when it comes to the likelihood of being brutalized or killed by the police. It's more likely to happen if you're racialized, if you're Black, or if you're Indigenous. We know that when it comes to rate of arrest, incarceration, opportunities in jobs, housing, healthcare, outcomes in healthcare and jobs and employment, we have all the evidence. It exists. It's not a one-off thing. It is a systemic problem, and that's going to require system-wide changes. And if you haven't experienced it personally, that's okay. That doesn't take away from the fact that it's a real problem. And then if we address it, we actually make the world a better place for everybody.
Now, we were talking about mental health issues. What about addiction issues? Should personal use of any drugs, not just marijuana, should that be decriminalized? Would that save some resources from the police department?
Yes, it's a great question, and I 100% agree. I campaigned on this. I've said this before. When I was a lawyer, I represented people that were charged with personal possession. And these are people that were dealing with mental health, poverty, or addiction, maybe a combination of those issues. And they didn't need a criminal charge or jail time. They needed healthcare workers and rehabilitation services and care. They needed help. So that's what we should do. If we want to help people out, it's not going to help them by putting them in jail. It would help if someone had access to rehab.
And we were talking about Prime Minister Trudeau, about his actions there. Now, also finds himself caught up in another ethical issue here. How should this latest issue and scandal be handled and investigated at the House?
Well, the question of this scandal is really, who is the government working for? And specifically, who is the Liberal government working for? And who is Prime Minister Trudeau working for? And we've seen when push comes to shove, we've seen just, whenever the Prime Minister feels like it, he's willing to break the rules to help his wealthy friends. SNC-Lavalin, he broke the rules to help wealthy, well-connected friends at SNC-Lavalin. Now again, breaking the rules to help his really well-connected friends at this organization. So the evidence is really clear. There was a clear connection. Trudeau family earned over $300,000 in speaking fees from we, and we normally tells people we don't pay speakers. So they were paying one family and not paying anyone else. There are so many ways to help students right now that exist, proven programs like the summer jobs program. There are grants. There's all sorts of ways to help students right away. If the government really wanted to do that, they could have done it right away. So all of the scandal shows that it was never really about helping students. It was more about helping really well-connected, wealthy friends of the Prime Minister and of the Liberal Party. So what I want to see happen is transparency. We need to know what happened, how it happened. How could something as obvious as an MP, we learn, and as a member of provincial parliament, we learn, if you've got a close family connection to a company, you can't give that company money directly. You need to step away from the decision and say, hey, I could be seen as biased because my brother works at that company, or because my family members get paid by that company. I'm not going to make a decision, but if you think that's the best place to go, you make the decision without me. that would be the right thing to do. And I don't understand how someone like the Prime Minister, with all the resources and team around him, couldn't identify a really obvious, it's not a complicated conflict of interest, very obvious. The Finance Minister has direct family members that are making money at we, that are hired there. The Prime Minister has direct family members that earn money. They should not be the ones giving $1 billion contract to that same organization where they know there's a conflict of interest. On top of that, to create a whole new program when there's all these proven existing programs that we should just spend more money on, like the summer jobs program, make it longer, make it apply to more people. Like, there's so many things we can do to make people, young people, have their lives better off. And there's better ways to do that.
So I think you asked this question yourself there. How could you spend, or how would you spend this $900 million to better help students? What would you do?
Well, I would say, there's a number of things. We could put it directly towards getting rid of student debt, helping students out who are feeling the pressure of the debt that they're under. We could use it directly on more grants. We already have a grant program. Let's send out more grants, send out more money to students. There's a summer jobs program, a Canadian summer jobs program. We could extend the length of that program, and we could hire more people. These are just proven ways. You don't have to come up with a new program. You don't have to wait or delay. Use what works right now and just put more money in there. Put more money into the grants, more money into the Canada summer jobs, help with student debt, lower tuition costs for people. There's so many examples that would be achievable right away and that wouldn't need any complicated new program or outsourcing. We could just get it done.
And once we get through and tackle and defeat COVID-19 there, what do you think the new normal should look like if there was an NDP government? What would you want to implement?
Yeah, we've been talking about this. We don't want to go, people have asked me, hey, Jagmeet, when are we going to go back to normal? And I looked at what is normal? What was normal? Normal was some of the most important workers, essential workers, being paid the least, seniors in long-term care homes being ground zero for the pandemic and feeling the brunt of it. Most of the deaths were in long-term care homes. Normal was a healthcare system that has been starved of funding. Normal is a lot of people that can't afford the medication they need to get healthy, who lost jobs and lost their benefit coverage and even are in a worse position to be able to afford the medication. So I don't want to go back to normal. I want to go forward to something better. And that better is a healthcare system that covers you from head to toe, dental care, mental health services, medication coverage, that concept of a healthcare system that's robust, long-term care homes that are not private, that are public or not-for-profit, where we can actually put seniors care first, where we invest in a sustainable economy, one that's not fluctuating up and down because of commodity prices, but we invest in long-term things like sustainable renewable energy, and we create jobs by investing in cities like building better public transit, where we create a job locally, we reduce our emissions because of public transit, and we make people's lives easier to get around. These are the things that I would say would be the new normal, or building a better Canada where no one is left behind and where we take better care of each other.
It's funny because we had your brother on a couple weeks ago, and he was saying exactly the same thing. Okay, can you convince my students here that I haven't just got him to come back and play you play your role there? He was actually joking that your parents probably would have thought that they would prefer two doctors than two politicians there. But what are your thoughts? He was explaining how proud he was of you and what you've accomplished. What do you think about your brother getting into politics and sort of taking up the mantle as well?
Well, I don't know if for anyone listening, if you've got a sibling, especially a younger sibling, like a younger sister, a younger brother, growing up, they always look up to you and you always take care of them. But there's a weird thing that happens as you get older. I'm getting a bit older. I got some grays in my beard now. When you get older, the age difference becomes less and less of a thing. Like a couple of years when you're a kid is a big deal, right? Because you're a couple of grades older, you're bigger, you got more experience. But when you get older, that age difference means less and less. And my younger brother, in a lot of ways, has been my older brother. Like I took care of him as a knucklehead kid, and I raised him with my own hands, and I feel really proud when I see him doing well. But in a lot of ways, he's the reason why I am the leader of a political party, the first ever racialized leader of a political party in Canada. It's because of him. He's the guy that got me into politics, that pushed me, that had me dream bigger when I was willing to settle for less. He was like, no, we got to do more and help more people. And so in a lot of ways, I am proud of him. as like my younger brother, kind of like my son. But in a lot of ways, he kind of inspired me and taught me and pushed me like an older brother. So that's kind of how it is. It's interesting.
Perfect. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. What advice do you have for my students studying during these unprecedented times? They want to get into politics. What advice can you have for them?
I missed a bit of your question. What advice do I have for them in what sense? In general?
In general, in terms of getting into a career in law, in terms of perhaps looking into working for a political party, navigating through this COVID-19 times and getting through the end.
Got it. So first off, I know that things are really scary and you're worried about the future. It's really unpredictable times right now. But one of the most important things that we all have is keeping that optimism and that hope alive. So in a broad sense, keep your hope alive. Keep that optimism. Like that's the only way you're going to get through is if you dream big, if you hope, if you're optimistic and you give things a shot. A lot of times I was afraid to take a chance and it was people around me that pushed me to take a chance. And that turned out to be the best thing for me. So take good chances. And if you want to get involved in politics, take a chance and ask to volunteer at a local office of a politician or a political party. Take a chance. And that chance, who knows, might turn into something amazing. A lot of the people that I've hired on my team were once volunteers. So volunteering is a great way to get known and to build up a sense of what you're interested in. And political parties always need volunteers. New Democrats, so volunteer for the NDP if you can, sure. But whatever fits your values, definitely get involved. I can tell you a quick story. My first job I got, I was graduated out of law school. I didn't have a job lined up. All my friends had these great jobs. I didn't have anything. And I was going to the courthouse, watching court cases, and I saw this lawyer that was really in a top-notch law firm, a firm that I would have dreamed to work at. And he saw me being kind of a keener, sitting in courtrooms, taking notes and trying to learn. And I walked up to him one day and asked if he would hire me. And he was kind of flabbergasted that I was so blunt. I didn't even know I said the word flabbergasted. He even says that. He was a bit shocked that I came up to him really bluntly and asked for a job. And he ended up hiring me. And I got a job at one of the best law firms in Toronto, a top law firm for criminal defense. So, taking a chance like that, it was gutsy. I didn't really think it all the way through. Maybe you should think it through. But yeah, take a chance and who knows what can happen. So that's my advice.
Perfect. Thank you very much again. And we wish you all the best leading the NDP party at these times. And thanks again.
Thanks so much. Great questions. Really enjoyed it. Take care, everybody. Bye.